And so really what would be good is if, you know, your sort of quick overview of collective impact. We're doing lots more work in this space, and there'll certainly be a follow-on with you to do in-depth sharing. But
I know this is my challenge, right? I'm a bit of a fan of collective impact. It's not always the right approach, right? But when it's a good fit, it's a beautiful framework. So let's walk through it from our perspective. So really what it is a disciplined form of multi-sector collaboration. And the key word here for me is multi-sector. There's been long histories of collaboration, like within the healthcare system, acute care through, you know, palliative care, for example, but not often or always do we reach and link across sectors and across perspectives. I like the fact that it's just celebrated its 10th anniversary as a framework, and it has proven itself and been evaluated and demonstrated to be an effective approach for high impact community change, particularly when, and it really should, take an intentional focus on not just changing programs and practice, but really thinking about what are the barriers that we need to change at a systemic level. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But in celebration or in honoring of the 10-year anniversary, John Kenya and others recently released an updated definition of collective impact, which in many ways I like, because it's kind of, it's more grassroots and kind of ordinary. But clean. So collective impact, a network of community members, organizations, and institutions that advance equity by learning together, aligning and integrating their actions, and achieving population and systems level change. Beautiful. So the thing about collective impact, right, is that one of the things that I think makes it effective is that it talks about a set of preconditions and 5 conditions. That's kind of like the bare bones. So the preconditions, when I look at them, we often think about them as a way of assessing a community's readiness, right? And helping the community to prepare before they even launch a collective impact initiative. So influential champions is one of those first key elements. Can you get commitment from key credible system leaders and champions from across a diversity of perspectives in the community? So certainly healthcare leaders, but also community leaders, faith leaders, business leaders. We need them all at the table. And are they willing to roll up their sleeves and use their credibility to bring others to the table and into the conversation? Urgency of the issue is really asking those at the table leading the effort to do a real kind of pause and a look. How is our issue on the minds and hearts of ordinary people? Are we even there? Do people understand why we think this is so important? Can we help them understand? Because sometimes we need to do some work around that first. We can't take as a given that everybody loves this issue because we do. Adequate resources really speaks to funding. Of course, you can't do this kind of work without funding, but it's way more than funding. So it's in-kind contributions, it's contributions of time, it's contributions of meeting space, it's contribution of knowledge, data, resources. And frankly, every single time a partner puts something into the middle of this mix, they are claiming and starting to share ownership of this work. And that's really, really critical. This is a type of work that no one organization or group owns. It is a shared ownership. And then the last sort of precondition we like to look at is what's the history of this community, specifically as it relates to collaboration. So, you know, because we all know every community is unique, and you spoke a lot about the importance of trust and trust being so foundational to all of this work. You know, if community A has a history of trusting relationships between and across leaders, they've had successful collaborations in the past, then, you know, their work plan, they may plow through the early part of the development of their collective impact strategy and common agenda very quickly. Community B that doesn't have a lot of trust, or maybe has had a failure or some history of mistrust or animosity between key players, between key sectors, that can really affect the speed with which this unfolds. They need different work. They need to do more together before they can get to the place of creating a common agenda, which is where you see a clash sometimes, where you've got this, oh, we have a work plan, we have to get this done in 3 months. Well, community A may get it done in a month and a half, but community B might need 6 months. But if you try to push it, it's not authentic and it won't stick. So that's the tension we have to sit in when we're working in this kind of a complex, dynamic world. And then if you think about it going further, here are the 5 conditions. I'm not going to go into them in any depth, but you see them, right? Common agenda absolutely has a shared vision component to it, but it's more than that, right? These shared sector leaders and community champions, they have that shared vision, but they also have agreed on what are the high-level priorities that they're going to focus their action around, and they have a common plan to work together to get it done. So it's a shared management paradigm, as you said. Shared measurement is the use of data not only to help shape what the priorities are and the common agenda, but also to track your progress over time. That mutually reinforcing activities is really interesting. Collective impact should never be about creating a net new organization, right? This is rather an opportunity for existing community organizations and resources to come together and not just look at their own lane, but actually look up and see collectively as we line up and align our programs and services, where are the gaps? Where are the overlaps? Where are there things where we can learn a lot from each other? Where might geographically things be in the wrong place? And we need to be now thinking about how we better deliver service in other underserviced parts of the community, for example. Continuous communication, for me, the big ones here are when you bring different sector players together, every sector has its jargon. So getting to learn from one another, having conversations with one another takes time because we got to build a shared language that we all understand. And we're not using acronyms that half the table doesn't. It also is the reminder that engagement and testing thinking with a broader audience is something that needs to happen ongoing through the entire journey. It's not something we just have budgeted at the beginning where we do this big hoopla and we have a couple of focus groups, then we set our plan and away we go. We're continually iterating, and that's why we need to continually engage. And backbone support for me is the final of the conditions. And this one is the one that I love. If you go back to the first paper, they talk about it as a backbone organization, but they too realize this isn't a new organization. This is a new way of working for existing organizations, but you can't just assume the collaboration is going to happen. And John Kenya, in fact, the co-author of Collective Impact, said the expectation that a collaboration can occur without any kind of supporting infrastructure is one of the most frequent reasons why it fails. And that's really powerful. You need to be intentional about creating that support infrastructure if you want the collaboration to thrive. So there you go. Now, did you want, I think what we were curious about and what I'm certainly curious about is in what ways, when you look at these 5 conditions, have you adapted them to really reflect New Zealand's culture and tradition?
So in terms of the collective action with communities slide, if you jump to that one, then certainly we have, there you go. We've really, taken a collective impact approach to localities, which is what is front and center for us at the moment in terms of our health reforms. I do just want to reflect on some of those preconditions and some observations, because we right now, in terms of the health reforms and localities, we are seeing the role of the influential champions, and I think that will be come to the forefront. So I'm very confident that that's what we will have across the locality space, where we'll have iwi Māori leaders, we'll have health, community, lived experience, and really bringing that together. The health reforms and our equity gaps has really set that urgency for us, so there's a lot would say it's a long time coming, but we're here and we're with the urgency, that burning platform. In terms of being resourced. I think there's more hope for the future given the recognition of the new reforms, the new legislation. We have legislation that has just gone through the House now in terms of PIOTA. I think it's the second reading. Where we're seeing some variation, as you would expect, is in those history of relationships, and the way communities and regions have put effort into that. We are finding they're able to achieve better outcomes for their communities. And so that's not to say we can't build those relationships going forward and with that real emphasis, but some areas will have a lot more work to do, and some will get straight to it. So those preconditions are absolutely vital, and I think bringing them to the forefront is important. In terms of the conditions, the 5 conditions, how we've adapted is your common agenda, your community aspirations. We've actually used our language. Oops, our language. It's okay. Our language in terms of what matters to whānau and communities, and as simple as that, being able to capture from the grassroots up, same as your condition, what is it and what are the critical shifts that whānau and communities want to see. Obviously, the additional condition or the additional paradigm we've got in there is the leadership culture and iwi partnership. So recognizing that in a locality space, iwi Māori and iwi Māori partnership boards, which are part of the legislation, will have quite a powerful role in ensuring that we have equity front and center and honouring Te Tiriti o Waitangi. That is really important. So having that recognised, I felt, was really important for us. The Rohi activity plan is really your mutually agreed activities, or in 3.0 high leverage. One of our context experts, or lived experience experts, said, well, actually Rohi, which means locality, in the New Zealand context, is really what it's about, bringing together a plan for that particular area based on those aspirations of whānau and community. So same approach. The metrics that matter, we like that language. We'd heard it from, it was an organisation in the States that have been doing a lot of health and social data join up, and it resonated with our community groups and our context experts, and we get that measurement and learning absolutely vital in terms of making sure we're going to fulfil those aspirations. Backbone, as you said, we wanted to add that change and implementation focus, because as a point of difference for collaborative Aotearoa, we're absolutely about change and implementation on the ground, and that backbone support is really the glue that keeps it all moving and together as well. And then continuous engagement, as you've talked about, is vital. It's got to be two-way, it's got to be ongoing. So pretty much what sits beneath it is the same, but I think if we're working with our communities, then we felt this language worked. And it may, as we engage further with our sectors, this could be a work in progress in reality. So yeah, that's
beautiful. Yeah, and I love the addition of the leadership culture and the iwi partnerships, Maori partnerships. I think that that's a missing piece that isn't necessarily in the 5 conditions, and yet essential. So one of the things we often talk about with collective impact is that it's an evolving field of practice. So yes, it's a framework, yes, it's an approach, but as more and more groups pick it up and and make it their own and learn and implement it, it is evolving itself. And 10 years later, the very co-authors of the original paper are coming up with a refined definition as testament to that, I think.